Once upon a time, in the village of Ustawi, lived a couple named Zola and Jabari. They had a small house, not too big or fancy, but it was filled with love and warmth. Zola was a beautiful and smiling woman whose smile could light up any room, while Jabari was strong and hardworking, well liked by many. Despite their deep love for their two precious daughters, Zola and Jabari faced poverty. Their daughters were the shining gems of their lives, bright and full of hope. Every day, Jabari toiled diligently in the fields, sweating under the sun. His earnings were modest, but he took pride in his work and did his best to provide for his family. Zola, on the other hand, worked as a seamstress in the village. She spent her days sewing clothes for the villagers and wealthy traders. Her work was tiring, but she never complained and continued to support her family. Their work was hard and their wages low, but Zola and Jabari were determined to give their daughters a better life. As the daughters grew, they needed books, pencils, and school fees, which were often unpaid. Sometimes, the girls would come home early from school because they couldn't afford the fees. This broke Zola and Jabari's hearts, but they always tried to improve their situation. Their home echoed with the sound of their children's laughter and the patter of little feet. Though they had little in terms of material wealth, their love made their home a place of happiness and joy. Zola and Jabari believed that one day, everything would be all right, even if they didn't know how or when. Every night, under the sparkling stars, Zola and Jabari would sit outside their small house, holding hands and imagining a bright future for their daughters. They knew life was tough, but their hope was something special, something that gave them the strength to carry on. One sunny morning, Jabari felt a burden in his heart. He knew he needed to find a way to improve their situation. Resolute, he decided to visit his friend in the neighboring village for help or advice. He made the long journey under the blue sky, thinking of Zola and their little boy. When Jabari arrived at his friend's house, he was greeted warmly. Over a simple meal, Jabari shared the troubles of his family. His friend listened attentively and then said something that would change Jabari's life forever. "Jabari, I cannot just give you fish. I will show you how you will never be hungry again." Jabari was surprised but intrigued. His friend told him about a mysterious cave in the mountains, rumored to hold infinite wealth. When Jabari stepped into the cave, he felt a chill. The air was filled with a scent he couldn't recognize. His friend warned Jabari that he could take as much gold as he wanted, but there was a price to pay. For every piece of gold, a sacrifice must be made, he warned. Jabari was terrified. He couldn't imagine doing such a thing. "I can't do this," he cried. "I want money to make my children's lives better, not to harm them. I would rather stay poor than do this to my children." But his friend's eyes grew dark. "Now that you know, if you turn back, you will not reach home," he threatened. Fearful and feeling trapped, Jabari thought of his small home, the unpaid school fees, and the empty pots at dinner time. With a heavy heart, he agreed to the old man's dark deal, hoping that somehow, everything would turn out all right. Returning from the mountains, Jabari was unusually quiet and sad. He did as his friend had instructed, mixing a small amount of black powder into his children's food, praying it wouldn't harm them. The next day was strange and unsettling. A strong wind blew through the village as if it were angry. It shook doors and caused a great deal of distress. For Jabari's family, the wind brought a great misfortune. His eldest son, who had the brightest smile, lost his sight. He cried out in fear, saying everything had gone dark. Jabari's heart broke. He hoped it was just the effect of the wind, a personal mishap, but deep down, he knew it was because of the black powder. The villagers whispered about the strange wind and Jabari's son's sudden blindness. Then, one quiet day, a man dressed entirely in black appeared in the village. From his hat to his shoes, he was covered in black, carrying a large and heavy bag, heading straight for Jabari's house. Without saying a word, he walked slowly to Jabari's home. The man in black told Zola and Jabari that he had heard of their son's unfortunate condition and had come to help. "Do not open this bag until I leave," he said with a seriousness that did not reach his eyes. Zola and Jabari were puzzled but hopeful. They watched the man walk away, then opened the bag. Inside were gold coins, enough to change their lives forever. For a moment, they forgot their worries and danced with joy, laughing and holding each other. They thought their troubles were over, perhaps the old man's deal wasn't so bad after all. But as the coins glittered in the sunlight, Zola looked at their son who still couldn't see, and she felt a chill. The stranger had made them rich, but the cost was too high. Jabari tried to convince Zola that it was just a twist of fate, but he knew the truth. Their newfound wealth was easy to accept, but in his heart, he knew the truth of his betrayal. The villagers sometimes whispered about the blind boy and wondered why Jabari had not helped them, but no one dared ask him directly. As the family enjoyed their wealth, there was always a shadow of sadness in their home. Jabari's eldest son had lost his sight, and Zola often wept for him. Jabari always refused to spend money on trying to help him, saying, "It's his fate. We cannot change it." Zola felt a deep sadness for her son but didn't know what to do. She trusted Jabari and believed he knew best. The villagers sometimes gossiped about the strange wind, but no one knew the truth about the family's wealth. With their newfound wealth, Zola and Jabari's lives changed significantly. They bought large fields and the biggest shop in the market. Their house was no longer small and humble, it was a mansion with many rooms. The family was now wealthy, and the villagers admired them for their riches and grand lifestyle. Despite their new wealth, there was a deep sadness in their home. Jabari's eldest son remained blind, and Zola often begged him to spend money to help their son. But Jabari always refused, saying, "It's his fate. We cannot change it." A few days later, the old man summoned Jabari again. He knew what this meant and felt deep dread. The old man told him it was time to renew their wealth. This time, the sacrifice had to be their other son. Jabari's heart broke. He couldn't bear the thought of harming another child, but the old man threatened him again, "If you don't make the sacrifice, all your wealth will disappear, and you will go mad." Feeling completely trapped, Jabari reluctantly agreed. He returned home with a heavy heart and mixed another small amount of black powder into his children's food. The next morning, his other son couldn't speak or hear. He had become deaf and mute. The family was devastated, and Zola wept for their child. Jabari told her it was their fate, just as before. A few days later, the same strange man appeared at their door again. This time, he said he was traveling and wanted to stay the night. By morning, he was gone, but he left another large bag of gold coins. Zola and Jabari opened it and found it filled with gold, enough to make them even wealthier. Zola begged Jabari to use some of the money to help their second son, but Jabari refused. He said it was their fate and there was nothing they could do. Zola began to feel suspicious, but she remained silent, not knowing what to believe. The family enjoyed their wealth, but now 2 children were suffering. The villagers whispered about the strange wind, but no one knew the truth about the family's wealth. 2 years passed, and Zola and Jabari lived a life of luxury. Their fields and shop were the most successful. Their sons enjoyed the best of everything. But the shadow of the first sacrifice still hung over them. One day, the old man summoned Jabari again. He knew what was coming and felt deep anxiety. The old man told him it was time for the final payment. This time, the sacrifice had to be Zola. Jabari's heart shattered. He couldn't bear the thought of losing his beloved wife. But the old man threatened him once more, "If you don't make the sacrifice, all your wealth will disappear, and you will go mad." Feeling utterly trapped, Jabari reluctantly agreed. He returned home with a heavy heart and mixed another small amount of black powder into Zola's food. The next morning, Zola fell into a deep sleep and never woke up. Jabari was devastated. He had lost the love of his life, and his heart was filled with grief. The strange man appeared at their door one last time, leaving another large bag of gold coins. Jabari and his sons opened it and found it filled with gold. They were rich, but Jabari's heart was broken. He explained to his children, but the weight of his guilt and sorrow was too much to bear. The family continued to enjoy their wealth, but the shadow of Zola's sacrifice hung over them. The villagers whispered about the strange wind, but no one knew the truth about the family's wealth. Years passed, and Jabari's children grew up. They became successful in their own right, but the shadow of their mother's sacrifice still hung over them. Jabari became an old man, filled with sorrow and regret. He couldn't bear the weight of his guilt any longer. One night, Jabari had a dream. Zola appeared to him, smiling and forgiving. She told him it was time to let go of his guilt and find peace. Jabari woke up with a sense of relief and decided to confess everything to his children. He gathered his children and told them the truth about their mother's sacrifice. The children were shocked and saddened, but they forgave their father. They understood that he had made a terrible mistake but had done it out of love for them. The family decided to use their wealth to help others in the village. They built schools, hospitals, and homes for the less fortunate. They hoped to make amends for the sacrifices that had been made. Jabari lived the rest of his life with a sense of peace, knowing that his family was using their wealth for good. The shadow of Zola's sacrifice still hung over them, but they had found a way to make something positive out of their tragedy. And so, the story of Jabari and Zola's family became a lesson in the village. The villagers learned that true wealth is not measured in gold but in love and kindness. The memory of Zola and the sacrifices made by their family lived on in the hearts of the villagers. Greed and ambition can lead to great wealth, but at a terrible cost. True happiness and fulfillment come from love, kindness, and making a positive difference in the world.